shall we call us to order? It is 6:31 and I've been in my chair for at least 14 seconds, so it's probably time to get started. Before we fully start, how about we round robin with some introductions, since we are such a big group, to make sure we all remember who the players are. Lenny, would you start?
Lenny Beddoe, Principal, Berkshire Elementary School.
Emily Norris, Sheldon.
Julia Callan, Sheldon.
Erin Paquette, Bakersfield.
Christy Martin, Sheldon.
Morgan Daybell, Business Manager.
Jean Marie Clark, Bakersfield.
Lynn Coda, Superintendent.
Rhoda McClure, Principal at Bakersfield.
Sandy Alexander, Principal, Montgomery.
Ian Trombley, Berkshire.
Mary Niles, Montgomery.
Catherine Barnard, Montgomery.
Lisa Hago, Berkshire. And visitor.
Visitor Sharon Yard, Franklin 5, State Rep.
Great. Thank you all. Okay. Lynn and I were talking about reorganizing the agenda a little bit. On if there are no objections, I'd like to suggest that we move the school spotlight, which is maybe item 4B, to the end of the meeting, just so that we can stay recorded the whole time and then let our friends not have to stay later. Wait for us, thank you. I was going to say suffer through, but I feel like that's the wrong thing to say.
Somebody behind us too that we didn't introduce.
Would you like to introduce yourselves to the crowd?
Sure. I'm Caroline Elander. I work here at Berkshire, and I have agreed to take the minutes.
God bless
Yay.
you.
Will you be joining us for all the meetings?
It's like a non-stressful meeting.
Yes.
Many of us, we are all very appreciative, but some of us more so than others.
Hey.
Nice
Aaron's
to have
just
you
sitting
back.
I know, I saw
tonight.
that.
Yeah. Hands
Bring
in
my
our
laptop.
pockets.
No, it's me.
Okay, let's start with the consent agenda. Any comments? Motions? Motion?
Motion to accept the consent agenda. Who made that motion? Lisa? Thank you, Lisa.
Comments, questions, concerns? Okay, all in favor? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. We've recognized our visitor. Are you joining us just as a visitor, or did you have any, I'm sorry, I've forgotten. Sharon, do you have any, are you here just for the fun of it?
I'm here just for the fun.
Okay.
Because I told her.
We appreciate our visitors.
We have been going to a lot of meetings, just like board, school board.
Well, we thank you for joining us this evening. We're a very, very serious crowd, so please bear with us.
I will appear to be long-suffering, if that makes it fun.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Morgan, I think we're at you.
All right. You got the report in my packet. The first two items were just informational. The auditors are coming next Monday to start for the 5 FNESU towns of 2019. My understanding is that fieldwork in Sheldon is going to start at the end of the month or in early October. And so I will certainly not have an audit, but have updates at your next 2 meetings. I've put the proposed FY21 budget development schedule in your packet as well. All of your meetings are regular meetings except for Wednesday, January 8th. Your regular meeting day would be January 1st, and we're assuming that you don't want to meet that day. So pushing that off a week. I have not reached out yet to town clerks to find out when they would need information for the town books, and I'm making an assumption that we would like to push at least something out through town books as we had in normal years in the past. So that's something you can just sort of keep in the back of your mind for now. Christy and I met today with Franklin Northwest's business manager, Laura McAllister, who was pretty instrumental in the early stages of the building project in Sheldon that was voted on last March. Also in that meeting was Steve Pitkin, who has been clerk of the works on the project here in Berkshire, the project 12, 15 years ago in Montgomery, and then the project 5 or 6 years ago in Bakersfield. So familiar with us and with our buildings. And it was really to give me an introduction to what has been done so far, and Steve and I are going to start working on a timeline for moving forward. I've got a lot of notes and a lot of thoughts, and I haven't been able to condense them into anything that's going to be that helpful for you, so I'll just kind of put a few things out there. Julia and Emily, feel free to correct me if any of the history I have is wrong. The project is largely about repairs to the envelope of the building. So it's siding, it's replacing a lot of doors and windows, both for heating reasons and for security reasons. There is some work that needs to be done in the gym. There's a lot of asbestos floor tile in the building, possibly some other places that we identified today in the walkthrough that would likely be part of that. Bringing at least some of the bathrooms up to ADA compliance, and then rerouting traffic in the parking lot to make it safer for students, both on the buses and getting dropped off. I think when we did our walkthrough, there was stuff that Steve Pitkin tuned into that I wouldn't have, that are now on the next list, as well as some things that Christy identified, and so we're gonna probably add to that list. In terms of a timeline, we want to be able to move on that project on June 15th when kids are out of school. The bond vote was for 1.7 million. The actual construction piece of that is about 1.4 million. So there are a number of contractors, I think, who would be qualified to do something of that size. The ones that we've had here in Berkshire, certainly the ones we had in the Montgomery project, would both be up to that, and that's something we would obviously bid out. To get to that point, we're going to need to move pretty fast. So the first steps, I think, would be to identify somebody, a firm that can take the work that Cross Engineering did, which was really just get a rough picture of what was needed and put a rough price tag on it and see if that was going to meet the support of the voters. We really need someone to help us get to a set of bid documents that we can put in front of a general contractor or a group of general contractors and see who's interested. Since I've been on the school board in Montgomery, we've used Black River Design successfully for just about every project. I would feel comfortable just going to them and contracting them for this work, or attempting to negotiate a contract with them for this work. Steve is going to do some brainstorming of other firms that have worked with similar size buildings and similar approaches. So we're not going to be doing a huge, expensive makeover. We know, just looking through today, that the 1.7 is going to be a very tight budget for what needs to be done, and there's more that needs to be done. Black River, I would say, is pretty attuned to that, and from working with all our boards up here, we're pretty good at hammering back scope when they need to. So I'll need some kind of direction from you on that, and if we are going to, we need to have a discussion on the level of board involvement, because it's a different impact on the timeline if we have to bring every decision back to this full board in a warned board meeting versus delegation of some of that authority to either a subcommittee of the board or a subcommittee that include board and administrators.
So Morgan, when we did the project here, we had a building committee that made all those types of decisions and had those discussions, and I thought that worked very well. Not being on it, it would was helpful to know that there are people who are involved in the day-to-day operation that I'm up to date. I think other people might feel the same way.
And I think we had, it was probably Bill Samuelson, 2 board members, so we didn't have a quorum, and the principal, I would imagine, were the ones on that.
Sounds
It's
familiar.
exactly because Caroline, I don't know where she
She's
just
over
went.
there now.
Caroline was a board member at that time, so she was on that committee, and that's exactly the makeup. And I think that, you know, we had certainly check-ins with the board and updates with the board, and but there were levels that could be taken care of at that committee level without having to come to the board.
Right.
Kind of
so-
predetermined those.
So we actually pre-qualified contractors, and that was a full board decision. So we looked over those packets from all the contractors who were interested and chose who was allowed to bid on that. And then the final contractor selection, I think, was full board. But other than that, a lot of the work was punted to that subcommittee.
So you get to make a decision about even who you'll accept a bid from? Having not been through this before, this is a
I know.
whole new
We
world.
had a bid opening. Do you remember that? Did you go with us? We had a bid opening. I remember we drove to Montpelier for a bid opening.
Yep. Yeah, so we can do that. We can pre-qualify contractors. We can skip that and just invite a certain number of contractors. We can advertise it publicly and see who applies. We can do a combination of the 3. We have a pretty good idea of who's around and who's going to be interested in this type
Right.
of project
Yeah.
in
There's gonna
general.
be sort of a limited pool of businesses that'll handle a project like this.
And I've not talked to Steve yet about when we might be able to bid this out. That will certainly be impacted on how quickly your architect can move. But my sense is the earlier the better, because you want to get these contractors when they have no summer work lined up.
Right.
Rather than when they're just trying to fit something in here or there, and they can say, well, we'll do it if it's going to make us this much money.
So you're looking for guidance at first on whether you want to go out to bid on the like planning documents, or just want to go
Right,
with
how we would
the-
select a firm to develop up to the bid specs. And then how you guys as a board want to operate with the decisions on this project.
And why, Morgan, are you decoupling the contracting from the kind of architectural drafting and such? Why not find a design build company that does it start to finish, one company?
I think because of my past history is really the only reason.
That's been the practice, and in terms of school construction, it has been the design firm creates the specs. It's almost like a checks and balance piece when you do it that way.
Yeah.
So they also were instrumental in helping us to look at those bids and how they came in, and being able, there's so much technical language in that I certainly never felt like I wasn't trained to understand that, but I knew the clerk of the work and the architect were. So it creates another level of support and protection for you as an organization. That's how I felt about the process.
Yeah.
And it went very well.
And
Way under.
in terms of bidding, I guess I'd be worried that you'd then have, say, 3 or 5 bidders who had kind of a vague idea of what you wanted to do and would have their own design on solving those problems. And it would get really hard to compare the proposals
Apples and
rather than
oranges.
having
Yeah.
one person. And it could be a firm that, I guess there's no reason they couldn't then bid on the build portion of it as well. But where you have one design going out to everybody, so you can really compare something that's similar from each. That's, off the top of
Yeah,
my head,
makes
that would be
sense. I
the
mean,
concern.
And it may be that design build is more applicable in a residential setting and less in a kind of commercial scale like
Right.
that we're doing.
Right, and you are, by law, you're required to build out the construction piece of it. You have more leeway in terms of, you know, architecture firms, legal firms, things like that.
Yeah.
It's not like that's something that you could ask for bids if you had 3 or 5 players that you'd be equally happy with, but you can also just kind of go through an interview process with those 3 or 5.
One thing I remember, Mary, about the pre-qualifying for contractors, when we called around, because that was our responsibility to call around to find out how other organizations perceived these contractors to have completed their jobs. Many of them didn't have a lot of school experience, school building experience, so that was really important to us to have people who understood and had been through the process with schools.
Yeah.
I think the real maybe political advantage of doing the pre-qualification is that you don't go to bid opening and have a bid from a firm that you don't really know anything about, who maybe have good references but have never worked a project around kids, and then you're in the place where you might not be taking the lowest bid because of something that's so intangible. Whereas if you are only bringing forward contractors who've done similar schoolwork, at that point, going into it, you said, you know, unless we see something really wrong, we're going to take the low bid. And voters certainly like that. The pre-qualification process does take time, but it is something that can happen in tandem while the plans are being drawn, because they don't need that. They're just going to send you their, you know, their resume, their corporate resume, and you're going to go through and say, okay, yeah, you've been around kids enough, or you haven't.
It matters. in a
Or the last
construction
3
project.
Yeah, I'm sure that it
Yeah,
does.
it really does.
Well, and understanding the time constraints of like, we have to open the doors, you have to have this a safe environment, even if you're not done for us to open the
Exactly.
doors, so.
Or if we find out that like the firm that did Montgomery's expansion, which was great to work with, if their 3 most recent projects were disasters, maybe we want to know that, you know, not invite them to bid.
So my question was around the planning documents. Does that, can we, I know you're sort of suggesting that maybe we just move forward with the one organization that you've worked with before. Does the dollar figure make us have to go out to bid with that?
Not because of the service, you're okay
Oh,
with not
okay.
bidding it. And I'm not gonna steer you one way or the other. There's certainly a firm that we've worked with enough that I'm comfortable with the quality of their work. And I think we've got a good enough rapport with them that we can negotiate a fair contract.
Right.
If there are other firms that people know about, or if you want me to wait and see what Steve comes back with, my guess is that we're gonna wanna have interviews within the next 2 weeks with those firms and have them at least come and see the project for folks that we haven't worked with before, to make sure that they're up for it. And then we'll have some kind of draft contract drawn up and say, this is what we're thinking, can you, what's the cost gonna be?
Thoughts? Anybody have thoughts or comments? Having worked a little bit in this world, in the higher ed world, I realized that we're talking about this in early September, but I know that like, we gotta move. Just because, like you said, time is gonna go quickly, but these firms are gonna get swooped up and have big, I mean, I had a whole $150,000 roof project get kicked down the road a year because in the roofing, the big roofing company world, that's little change, that's pocket change. So they had bigger projects that they wanted to do. So I think that that's something that we just need to keep in mind, that we have to, I know this feels like, oh, we have plenty of time, but like, we don't really.
I feel like if we have rapport with Black River, you're comfortable with Black River, they've done school architectural work, I'm comfortable with that. I don't know how you or anybody else is feeling. We need legally and want more bids from the actual building and contractor. But knowing it could take a while to even get an architect right now, I feel like it's more crucial that we get that part done first. And
Yeah.
we'll be good.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable.
Okay. Do you want to make that motion? Were you looking for a motion on that?
Probably would be good to have a motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the motion is to connect
To direct me to try to negotiate a contract with
with
Black River. To get the Sheldon envelope project to bidding.
That was Emily.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Are folks thinking they want to go the pre-qualification route? Do they want to just advertise, just invite people that we know can do it? Which is kind of like a pre-qualification without
Yeah.
doing your homework, I guess. And we've done it, I think we've done it every possible iteration. So I know in the most recent Richford and Enosburg Windows projects, once we had the docs set up, Black River and the person that we hired as a clerk of the works said, here are the 5 firms that can do this that are close by and who would be interested, and we just invited them. We can advertise. The Berkshire project was significantly bigger than what we're looking at in Sheldon, and we went through the pre-qual process for that. But I'm okay with any of them, because as long as we're starting now, we have enough time to do whatever you want.
What do you ladies think?
I would suggest maybe going that pre-qual route. But that's just, I mean, Sheldon hasn't had exposure with a bond. So,
Mhm.
I think I hear what you're saying. I think there's some comfort in doing the work and in digging in. I look at that process similarly to some of our administrative hiring processes in some ways. It's the best analogy that I could compare it to, where it really was that they present you with, you know, the equivalent of a resume. And here's our products, here's some of our designs. And then we divide up, and we had board members calling board members and other people that they knew, and business manager calling business manager, and principal calling principals, and just really doing that thorough background check and trying to get a good sense of it. So I agree with Morgan, either way is appropriate, but if you're feeling like pre-qualification, know that that's what it will look like. And it'll be, I think we had maybe 10, Caroline. I think we went through around 10, so it was fair amount. Yeah, it was a lot of process.
I think
It's a lot of work.
I think we took 8 of 10. I think there were 2 on that list.
so the
That didn't make the
that
cut.
didn't
the
make the
other
cut.
option is to get companies from the clerk of the works and the architect, like people that they would recommend, and then vet those companies. It's a
And
smaller
any
pool.
that you guys have that you know.
Or ones that you or we have all worked with historically.
I
I sort
know
of like that idea.
Yeah, because that's a
And then you
smaller
still
pool
do
to
that
vet.
same due diligence
It's to the
process.
vet-
that
yeah.
you
Still
have,
looking,
Yeah.
yeah.
right?
I like that.
Yeah.
Just same, just smaller scale and considering our
Right.
timetable.
Smaller pool.
Yeah.
I'm not in favor of the let's just advertise it, because I think
You're
there's a
gonna get-
limited pool, and I don't want to waste our time or our money
No.
on advertising. So unless anybody's,
No,
that would
I
be my
agree with
least
you.
favorite choice.
Yeah.
I do want to be respectful of what you think the Sheldon community would be most comfortable with, but I do think that that's gonna, if we go the pre-qual way, then it's a lot of work on, probably a lot of work on our part that no one else is gonna know even happens on the
Right.
one hand, right? But either of those I think I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
So what are you going to tell Morgan to do?
Yeah, so we need to make a decision.
I mean, I feel that we should kind of go the hybrid of the pre-qual, kind of get the number of people, whether it's 3 or 4, vet them or have them vetted by your architect and whoever else, and then we take them like that. You're still vetting, which is my concern.
Yeah.
Just it won't take as much time as option 1.
So I would say then, for all of you individually in your real lives, if you've got experience with folks that you want us to look at, please send me those names. And, there are 3 I know that we always want to bid on projects around here. 2 are from over the mountain. I don't know if Sheldon's too far, like at what point it doesn't make sense for them.
Right.
So, especially for folks who maybe know Chittenden County or Western Franklin County outfits that have not been willing to bid this far out, it would be great to know them.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's anybody in the Franklin Northwest world that if they've done any projects, then they could recommend somebody.
But Black River's done probably over half of the school projects in the state in the last 10 years, so they will know who the players are.
Good resources, yeah.
And their recommendations, like Morgan said earlier, will be based on companies that have experience with school construction, because school construction is different than residential or commercial construction. There are different requirements.
Yep.
So I would assume that they would not recommend
Right.
any firm that hadn't.
And we're really looking for a firm that is going to take this start to finish, because it's such an interconnected, like there's a lot of pieces that are dependent on, windows are dependent on siding, et cetera, et cetera. And just to be clear, I guess for the community, that it's not we're looking for somebody to bid on the siding and then the windows and the roof and
The general contractor, they may sub out some of those. They will sub out some of those pieces, but your general contractor will take the project from start to finish.
Okay.
Cool.
It would be nice, and I don't know how applicable this is at the commercial scale, specific to companies that work with schools, but to look at materiality, toxicity, energy savings with the windows. If there's new lighting being installed, can those be energy efficient? Can we, do some kind of, LEED standards within the confines of the budget? Can we have carpets that don't off-gas? Can we have formaldehyde-free materials? Can we have low toxic, no VOC paints? It'd be nice to see if anyone in that world, builds to those standards.
Yeah, I would say that Black River certainly is very in tune to the energy efficiency, heat efficiency piece of that. There are regulations around the toxicity piece. They're probably not as stringent as some would want them to be. And I don't remember any conversations specific to that with them.
Well, early on, there were choices along the way where your construction team had to make a lot of those choices around materials late, like when you get closer to the project. But if it was something that was important to you in the bid process, I'm wondering about the cost. Like if you make that a requirement in the bid process, that's going to inflate your, I'm not trying to say that I don't want to do them or focus on them, but if you make it a requirement in your bid, it's going to be reflected in all of your bids. Where we had choices was when we were actually in it. We already had a contractor, and then it came time to say this material or this material, and we could look at the overall budget and where we were in terms of, because we had weekly meetings, so you will have an update of where you were standing with your budget. Are you coming in over? Are you coming in under? And if you're coming in under, sometimes you have greater flexibility to be able to do some of those things. And Black River is really good about, if you say these are the goals of the project, we want to keep it to this scale, and we want to have a lens of looking for those efficiencies in the lead piece through the work. They will keep bringing you back to those two things all the way through the process, and make sure that you're really focused on your budget.
Yeah.
So they'll push on you if you try to add to your scale. They will remind you. You asked me not to let you add to your scale because your priority was this. They're very good.
A couple other tactics that we have when we go out to bid. We can do parts of it as kind of potential add-ons. So maybe we say, here's the base project, but also tell us what it would cost to put solar panels on the roof. And then you get that all up front in the bid, but you make those two decisions separately. Or say, we've got 10 bathrooms in the school, we know 2 of them need to be ADA compliant. Give us a per bathroom price, and if the project comes in high, we say, okay, we're only taking the 2. the project comes in low, maybe we can add a few of those on. So you've got a little bit of flexibility there.
And
That's a good
windows
idea.
are a biggie because that's one of the biggest sources of heat loss
Yeah.
for a building. And so, can the budget accommodate triple pane, like low E argon filled windows, or and it's nice to have some flexibility in the bidding process, like what does the bid look like if we're going with a lower tier window? What does the bid look like if we're going with a,
Yep.
a high end, super energy efficient window? And
Right.
are these companies focused on air sealing and proper ventilation? There's a lot, obviously, of the complex, especially when you're looking at enclosure work like that. I'm channeling Jacob while
I can feel it.
He would be very proud of you there.
Yes.
So it sounds like you're looking for at least one more motion. Do you want a motion about, or no, do you not want another motion about,
So I am going to
Bidders?
contact Black River.
okay,
I don't think I need a motion. I'm gonna just start to
Okay.
collect bidders, and if you
Okay.
guys
okay.
have firms that you wanna add to that. And I think for tonight, that's all I need. I did ask Steve Pitkin to come and walk through the building with me. At some point, I'll talk to the architect and I'll say, is this a big enough project that we need to have a clerk? At that point, we can decide if we wanna bid that out or just try to come up with something permanent with Steve. He's been very good for us. He's also trying to retire and I don't know what his workload's like. So that may be one where we don't really have a choice and we need to go out. And that's an interesting process because there are a lot of people in your community who think they can be a clerk in the works. So that if we do end up going to bid on that, we're gonna have to do a lot of pre-work on that.
If Steve is up for it, I would recommend him. He was very, very thorough, very good, and he's still helping the school with certain things that come up regarding that
great.
project.
Do you need to establish your subcommittee?
That was
Yeah, that was
the,
my next
yeah.
one, yeah.
So I guess that's the question, do we wanna establish a subcommittee or not? Sounds like,
I would suggest
Yeah.
it just
Can.
because then you have a
Yep.
small group of people who really have their thumbs on what's going on and
yeah,
it's sort of multidisciplinary.
When you get in it, it'll start probably every other week, and then when you're in it, it'll be weekly, and there'll be lengthy meetings. So I cannot imagine we can pull this whole board.
Yeah.
You're gonna have
Yeah,
to
it's
have a
just not
subcommittee.
possible.
and I would think at least one of the members needs to be Emily.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I'd say you or Julia, but
But
I was
Julie-
hoping both, actually. That's my
Alert.
feel.
yeah.
We have a board thing we're gonna talk about at the end.
so Emily.
Got it.
We're definitely gonna
Saw
be
that
Emily.
and I went, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Now I know. So please, Emily, if you can be part
Yeah.
of that committee, that would be great.
Sure.
Do you want one more?
Yeah, it sounds like two worked well.
We've had two in the past.
Yeah.
But that was only because of quorum, right? Now we have a bigger number.
Right, you could have more than two. Your quorum is 5, so as long as it's less than 5.
We should have building administrator, we should have.
Definitely.
I
That was
assumed
assumed,
that.
yeah.
I assumed that. Bring it up.
Are there others that have interest?
Kathy Chatty over there, did you have any interest in being on the planning commission?
No, I'm like, he's very knowledgeable.
You have-
Be contractor?
Yeah. If you have an interest in it, that's the only, like, I don't have a lot of skin in the game, so.
Yeah, and I've been involved peripherally in trades with Jacob for almost 20 years, so I definitely feel like I understand the language, I understand a lot around like building science and materiality, and
Right.
time is always the limiting factor, not interest. And I'm not quite on my feet yet, I can't even
Right.
drive a car.
Good point.
But I could do it. I just might not be able to immediately jump in. Pun.
I don't think you're, good pun. I don't
Jumping
think
is
it's
really what got us
going
into
to be
this
quite so
predicament. Okay.
immediate.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Is,
Thank you.
Is
Yeah.
that committee open to community members?
I don't think so.
Trying to remember.
I'm just thinking
Did we?
for expedition.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we did.
I think it's
We had
more,
community in
Community input came before the.
before the yeah.
Yeah.
it's more to make decisions on behalf of the board.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
even like, Christy, I assume you want me showing up at those as well.
Yeah.
But it's not like we're gonna get to vote. It's
Alright.
really gonna be
Okay.
the folks that you have here saying, yeah, you guys have the authority to move ahead with that.
Can I ask a question? I've worked
Sure.
For a number of years with schools regarding indoor air quality and environmental health, and Mary brought up the issue of like low and no VOC building materials. And I was wondering if maybe I could email a list of resources. I mean, you guys use Visbit and stuff like that, but for instance, when a school is looking at flooring, rubber flooring, it's not super shiny like that, but the indoor air quality when you use rubber flooring is greatly enhanced because it doesn't off-gas like the vinyl tile, and you clean it with a regular cleaner. You don't strip and wax it. So there are like resources for information like that out there that I haven't done for a little while, but I'd be really happy to just put together a little list of links that could maybe be useful.
Yeah, that'd be
That'd be
helpful.
great. Yeah.
Thank you.
See, it's good you were here. Okay, are we ready to move to your next topic?
Is that the
Plowing.
subcommittee? Do you want anyone else on there?
Well, so we're at Emily, Mary, Christy, Morgan, Lynn? Is Lynn get to be on that? Sorry, I thought you were just a natural member.
I get to be an extended member because of the regularity
I'll
of your
keep her in the loop.
visits. Yes.
Was there a fifth person on the other committee when you've done this in the past? It was just those.
Well, it's really the board members that you're
Yeah.
worried about. So if there's a third board member that wants to be involved,
Well, and if the.
it won't trip quorum.
Well, the fifth is your clerk of the works.
Oh, yes, okay.
So you'll have your
Gotcha.
general contractor.
Yep,
And then the year 5.
right,
And that person is key.
right. Maybe the other Sheldon rep, if he or she is interested. We could add somebody,
Yep.
I suppose, yeah.
I promised one meeting a month. That's how you rope them, right?
Yes.
Julia.
Nothing happens.
That's just easy in and
Oh
out.
my God, yes.
Whoever told you that.
You're sitting here silent.
Okay. Now plowing?
No plowing.
Okay.
So both of the new boards have talked about combining services into single bids. I will start bringing some of those ideas to you at these meetings and the SU meeting. Right now, each of the 4 schools is working with a different provider for plowing. Some are done by the municipalities. When we get hit with snow, it's going to hit all buildings at the same time, and so I'm not recommending that you try to find one person to do all of them. And if you're okay with that, I don't think I need a motion, but just direction to work with the principals to renegotiate contracts if they're happy with what they're getting, and then bid out contracts if they're not happy with what they're getting. And I think there may be a mix from what I've heard.
I'll make that motion.
Is it a motion or was it direction?
I just need direction.
Direction, yeah.
That makes sense.
Good direction.
All right,
Onward.
that's all I got.
Okay. Lynn, it's you.
Okay. So I want to start by saying at the last board meeting, I presented to you the continuous improvement plan, the goals we've been working towards within the supervisory union. One of the things my office has been trying to really focus on is how can we be better at supporting our building administrators. So they have huge jobs in their buildings, and their attention is divided by so many things, especially in our K-8 schools, which these are our K-8 principals. So one of the things that keeps coming up is how can we do things to take things off their plate so that they can be more efficient and more focused on becoming the best instructional leader that they can be within their building, because that's what's going to move the needle in terms of student learning and instruction, which is the ultimate goal. We've hired them as our educational leaders. So there are two areas. I'm seed planting right now. I want you to consider an idea. I'm not asking for a motion. I just want you to consider an idea, and we'll talk a little more about it in October and at the SU meeting. So when I think about the things that distract principals the most and take up a lot of their time, and many of you as board members have seen firsthand how this can happen, a big one is facilities and grounds, especially in these K-8 schools, because we have great employees. They're not necessarily facilities and grounds managers, and we're more focused on maintenance and cleaning rather than the prevention and the looking for how we can more efficiently do things. So one of the things that I've been really thinking about, and I've talked with both VisBit and the VSA, there is a pilot this year where VisBit and the VSA have joined together, and they're focusing on facilities and grounds director training, like professional development for facilities and grounds directors. So the intention behind that is there's never really been a good level of professional support for those positions, and they're trying to help those folks out so that we can get better at how we're managing the facilities and grounds within our schools. So one of the things I want you to consider is, as we move forward, if we could have a facilities and grounds director that took some of these pieces off the plate of the principal, like my best example would be in Bakersfield last year with, breaking toilets and leaking pipes and, windows and all the other things. So if you look at a principal's time over the course of the week, and you look at what portion of their time is spent dealing with things that fall into that category, it's higher than you might think. Mm-hmm. And I love our principals, and they're all brilliant people. They are not trained in facilities and grounds. So you're asking them to have oversight and, make some pretty big responsibilities. Lenny, for example, is the owner of a water system, and I'm sure.
Thank you.
I hired him before I told him that he was going to own a water system, because it's a lot of work. That's not how I want these leaders spending their time. It's not what we've hired them for. So I'm planting that seed of, as we're thinking about budget and we're looking forward, could we be thinking through the lens of facilities and grounds director? Questions, comments, thoughts?
Are you thinking a director who would oversee the custodians in each of the 4 schools, one director?
So the number of schools, that I have a big question mark. I don't have it fully shaped. I've talked with the VSA about, what models, what do they look like in other schools. So I have some job descriptions for facilities and grounds directors. I have thought about it both ways, Lisa. I've thought about it system-wide, like for the entire SU, and working with the lead custodians in each building to see if there is work that we can do better together. And but then I've also looked at it through the lens of, is that too big of a scale, and should we be focusing on these 4 buildings and looking for that support at this level? So I'm not sure where we're going to go. I mean, that conversation I think is going to come up at the SU board meeting, but I really just wanted to plant that seed because several of you are on that SU board, for you to start thinking about that impact. So I don't know if there's anything the principals want to add to this conversation.
I'd like to add something. I came from a 3-town school district in Maine, and we had that type of a position at the district level. It also helped around budget time, when we were looking at the facilities and the needs of the different facilities, and each principal was able to contribute, what they thought the top priorities were for their building. And then that facilities manager kind of went around, scoped it out, and prioritized the list for the budget. So it was an equity thing too, I felt. So it makes it a lot easier budget time.
I'd be curious to see how many hours a week principals feel that you're spending on this type of work, like a time study, I think would be helpful. So it kind of guides you, is this a full-time position? Is this a part-time? Like, what would it look like? And the associated costs, like what is the base salary for someone who's competent in that realm?
I feel like that stuff comes in spurts.
Okay.
Like, we did an oil tank project that I mean, we didn't think it was emergent, and all of a sudden, it needed to be done.
Right.
And it was big, and I didn't really
I think
have a lot
the
of
answer would be
experience
too
with oil
much
tank
time.
removal.
Too much.
It's just too
Yeah.
much time. It's,
It's and then to get the bids and
Mm-hmm.
it was a lot. It took a lot of time.
Yeah.
And
there's that piece of in the moment problem solving, planning, whatever.
Right.
But I know I'm not doing any close to even a reasonably decent job at like doing foresight around like what my building is going to need next and when it's going to need next
Right.
and what mechanical
Yep.
things or
Yep.
whatever else. And if we had somebody who could take that lens, I think there's going to be a lot of, it would be long term, the savings to realize those kind of savings, but I think they would, I could imagine they would show up.
Yeah, I agree.
I think sometimes the concern is that because I don't know a lot about the boiler,
Right.
for instance, when someone says you need to do this to your boiler, or it could be catastrophic. I'm like, oh, okay, let's do it. But I don't really
Right.
know if that's
Right.
what we need to do with a boiler. And perhaps there's no one on staff necessarily that knows that either.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So then it turns into a lot of
And that's where the
Work.
VSA, because we do have people that are kind of the heads in their own buildings. However, I don't know that they have that level of training either. And that's where the partnership between BISBA and the VSA, I was really excited when, this happened last spring and they kind of merged their efforts together to see this through, because I think that looking down the road and saying, what do we need to do? We have this great building now in Berkshire. How do we maintain it at this level? How are we ensuring that, our HVAC systems have all of the preventative maintenance that are done, and your grease trap, and, you're making sure that you're in compliance with all of those groundwater permits that you need to redo every few years.
Because even a good, my maintenance person currently is good and hardworking, but he's still always kind of chasing his tail. So his opportunity to keep that lens of what's going to be next, or I just did this lubrication thing 5 years from now. I need to make sure I come back to it. Like
Right.
there's some oversight that's hard for that person who's in the moment to
because
keep
they're
track
in it,
of.
yeah.
Well, the district sort of runs a spectrum of like, we have schools that are older, and so they have infrastructure concerns because they're older, but then you have schools like Berkshire that's brand new, but it's new technology, and so you sort of want somebody who can work on both ends of the spectrum and ideally work with all of the schools in the district to sort of see efficiencies and savings in that respect.
I was just gonna say, and I think that for our custodian, that's what she is. She's really more of a custodian than a facilities person. That's where her
Right.
energy is put, and so she's not seeing all those bigger pieces at all.
And that's where you end up in the reactive place.
Yes.
because
Right.
something goes
Yeah,
wrong.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I would agree with what Sandy said. I work with the director of facilities across the college, and so he prioritizes like, okay, I have X number of dollars in the bucket, and this year I can do this for this campus and that for that campus, but these other things, we can throw 25 grand at, and maybe it's like a few windows this year. And so, so you can do some of that forward thinking that maybe you don't end up in this place where you're doing like this big project in Sheldon, right? So, I think you're right. Like Emily said, it's probably a long time before we can make some real savings on that when you've got somebody like trying to look into the future for you. But the other thing that I was thinking about is I'm fairly confident that every principal that we have here got into this profession because they love to work with kids and they love to be teachers, and then they just sort of moved up to becoming administrators, and now they're consumed with, and I know I had this conversation with Anissa, she's consumed with building maintenance, and that is not what you got here for, right? So I think it's really us making that recognition and appreciating the skill set that they come with, and then supporting them with a staff that can help them manage all of these pieces of property for us. So I know something's going to happen tomorrow, but I think it's a really smart decision and a good. It's not going to be an inexpensive decision, but somebody that has that knowledge and can say, well, we don't need the $25,000 fix. We actually could do like the $5,000 fix, because they just have that knowledge and that experience. So, yeah. Sounds like
stay
we're all
tuned.
kind of on the same page about it, which is good.
Okay, so again, through that same lens of prioritization, I want to talk about early childhood education. So when I think about, I was a principal not that long ago, so I can definitely relate to the world that these folks are living in. The two things I would say that took the majority of my time as a building principal was dealing with facilities and grounds, and also dealing with the regulations associated with early childhood education. So we have preschools in our buildings, and the preschools actually are governed by both the Agency of Human Services and the Agency of Education. So what that essentially means is we have kind of double requirements on those preschool programs. So we have to meet the expectations of the Agency of Education while at the same time meeting the same regulations that like private preschool programs would have to meet. So we're, there are training requirements. We're kind of double background checking our people because that's what the statute requires that we do. Most organizations that I'm familiar with have an early childhood director who takes the lead on that. We have not had anyone in that role in our organization, so we hire our early childhood teachers and we do the best we can to try to support them, but we put a lot of pressure on them to take the lead on some of those roles. So they're, bringing the trainings in and they're making sure that all the right paperwork is done and they're meeting all the regs for early childhood regs, and no joke, are like this big.
And then there's a guide to help you understand the regs.
Yes,
Better than the regs.
it's complex. So this has been a perennial conversation that has gone through all of our administrators. Like, how do we unpack these regs? So your administrators are in that position of having to be the directors in most cases of these programs, and they're having to unpack those regulations and apply them to those school-based early childhood programs, which is unlike anything we've had to do in 5-year-olds and up in that kindergarten through 12 range. So that is another piece that takes away from your principal. And when we think about efficiencies, that time and effort is duplicated from Lenny's school to Christy's school to Rhoda's school to Sandy's school. So each of them is taking that substantial amount of time to support all of those efforts. And if we could think of it through the lens of, would a director help us to be more efficient? I don't think that we would need an early childhood director that was on, a year-round contract or, I think we could do a teacher contract type role where someone could be in charge of all of those requirements. So the cost of it, although it would be a higher, I think that it would not be as substantial as what we might think. I think we could do it, around a teacher salary piece. So that's another seed I'm intending to plant with you tonight, because it's we can go further in depth if you would like to, if you want some perspective from the principals about those requirements. I will say I feel the worst for Christy because through the merge, Christy has come from a system where there was an early childhood collaborative, really, and you had a director that was taking on all of that, and we just do not have that level of support here. So Christy got to learn. She had like a really firsthand, quick introduction to the world of licensing regulations in early childhood. So she spent a good chunk of summer working. We tried to push some support into her to figure this out, and it's been a lot. Is that
She's
an
lived
okay
to tell.
summary?
I've looked to tell. We also had all new people, so
Yeah,
that probably
too.
didn't help either. But
Nobody knew.
right. No, I was like, I don't know.
Anything any other principals want to add about the early childhood piece?
Could this be something that would be a stipend for one of our existing teachers, or not enough?
We've been
time
trying to do that, but then we're not pushing in training. Like we're
Right.
constantly just
The
trying
training
to do the minimum to get by this. Anything you want to add about your
I mean, it's
experience
just
with-
needed. I mean, I know I'm saying, making it sound simple, but like if you want to make your preschool teachers start crying, just walk in and say, does that meet the regs? They might not know and they're gonna freak out. it's just too bad because it comes back to the whole piece of like what we want to do is take care of kids and give the best educational experience we can, and all the different things you're talking about are things that are getting in the way of the preschool teacher or the principal doing that. So if we had somebody that could take those kinds of things off our hands, we can actually work on just doing better instruction.
So a lot of other pieces like the Vermont Early Learning Standards, and then there's Teaching Strategies Gold, and then there's a STAR relicensing. Like there are so
the
many
curriculums
layers
on top
of
of
this.
that.
It's hard to describe.
And to remember that those children have to wash their hands for 20 seconds, you know, to use the bathroom.
Yeah.
20, it's written in there.
And so,
And how often they have to eat.
Yeah. And how many times you have to wash the tables
Yeah.
in the room.
so you see this person as being someone who would be just kind of deeply enmeshed in this, like, in the kind of understanding and implementation of the regulations, and then be the kind of facilitator for each of the schools to kind of in working in concert with our early ed teachers, kind of helping them then. So it relieves some of that from the principals that need to be constantly kind of communicating the regulations, making sure they're being applied in the everyday, and I'm sure they probably change.
Well, and providing the
regularity.
professional development
Yeah.
and the training, the recertification, making sure that all of our files are in compliance. I mean, what happens also through the AHS piece is that we have regular visits where they check compliance for all of those regs. So when we are turning over staff in early ed, there's a lot of training that goes into ensuring your staff understands how to be in compliance with all those things. And right now, we're relying on our existing teachers to try to, lift up all of the new folks within our supervisory union, and it doesn't feel like an efficient way to do it, and that's when it falls on the building leaders.
And I look at it a lot like a director of student services. It's kind of that role that then oversees, director of student services oversees your special ed teachers. And the same would be true of this kind of director that oversees those early childhood teachers. At least that's the model that I've seen in the SU that I came from, and it worked really well.
And the trainings that are offered are not nearby. One of my parents had to drive to like Colchester or something because the St. Albans one was canceled, and she lives in Berkshire and she was driving at night to Colchester to try to take this class for the requirements. I felt really badly, but I didn't know what else to offer her. So.
Is there any, I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but is there any update from the legislature on this? Because I know at one point they were going to try and
the AOE
fix the regulations so that there wasn't two agencies overseeing early childhood.
I thought that was beginning to happen, so what Lynn is saying doesn't really mesh with what I was thinking was happening, unless it's a future date that's gonna diverge. But I thought school-based early childhood was going to be overseen by the AOE.
I don't believe that passed.
We kind of thought it was going to
We
go that
thought it
way.
was,
Yeah. But it turned the
I'm going to
other-
speak
yeah.
for somebody else, but I know when I had those conversations with Jay Nichols about it, he'd say you'd be surprised about the number of people who were on the opposite side
Right,
of that
who were
decision
opposed to
and who
that.
got in the way of it.
But doesn't that just kind of streamlines certification and background checks? I mean, you still have to, there's still
Do
the
the work.
regulations and all
Right.
that.
There's still the professional
But you wouldn't have to be
development.
worried about two
A little,
agencies.
yeah.
Right.
The fingerprints haven't changed.
Apparently it did not happen, we didn't discuss it this
Yeah.
year, and I just.
You had several proposals that I think that landed in Montpelier. I don't think they made it through.
Gotcha.
Do you know anything about that?
I don't, it's not my committee.
Yeah.
I'm all things ag and forestry, but I do know that conversations were happening and it is a biennium. So, I expect that something will come down through this next year, if there's a chance to do that. That it'll happen this next year.
I almost think it was 2017-18 that those conversations were happening, so
That sounds
if
about
that's
right.
the case, then it's dead and gone and won't come back until 2020 and 2021.
I honestly think if I really thought hard about how long we've been having the same conversation, I'm saying at least 4 or 5. At least 4 or 5
So it's not
years.
coming back.
since the advent of the, what was it, Act 160 or whichever one gave the universal
Right,
child care.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're
Gathered a whole
talking
bunch of input.
Jay, then that definitely was prior to this biennium starting, so.
The conversations I remember being more about access to childcare in Vermont being greatly impeded by the onerous requirements. So I know I've heard the conversation and I don't know where that is right now.
I think this year we mainly focused on the onerous requirements for early childhood educators, and there were some provisions made for their education to be condensed, and I don't know the exact, I can't tell you the exact iteration of that, but I feel like people can take courses through tech centers now to become early childhood licensed.
Is it licensure or recertification?
Yeah, I really don't know, because that also is not my committee, and I don't have an in-depth knowledge of that. However, on the bright side, there is more money available for students who want to go into the field of early childhood education, and there's more assistance for families who previously couldn't access that. So that's what we focused on this year. I'm pretty sure it was a previous biennium that they were talking about the AOE splitting with the AHS.
It's come up more than once. I mean, the other, I don't want to lose sight of the overarching goal of putting someone in this role would be looking at our programs and focusing on quality. Obviously, that I didn't say that, but I should have started with that. I mean, that we want to make sure that we're not just so focused on the compliance piece, that we're not looking at the programming and the professional development, where we want to go, what opportunities we want to provide those kiddos. And right now, we don't have anyone taking the lead in ensuring that. So, another seed planted.
And then would you think of that person being for just an MVU or possibly for the entire
All of
SU?
them. For this, I'm certain I would request this for the whole SU.
One
Yes.
person. Yeah,
Yes.
that's great. It's a little iffy for the building.
Yeah,
For the
it's a
scope,
lot.
that would be a lot of buildings and a lot of facilities. I think though, if it was a good salary, one person certainly would be within a skilled person's kind of ability to manage all of those facilities rotate between them. I think that would be possible if we decided one person at a higher salary for the entire SU rather than two people lower salary, but two sets of benefits and stuff. I mean, it would be worthwhile.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be that kind of conversation has to happen at the SU board level. But my intention tonight was to just get you to start thinking about that, because if we're looking at our leaders and we're saying our priority is student learning, we really want you to focus on, improving both academic and social emotional learning opportunities for your kids in your school. If we could take those two pieces off their plate and refocus us, I think that the amount of time that they could capture would be substantial. And I think that we could see a real direct impact on learning for kids.
So I'm just wondering if this board decides that, like, we wanted to go forward with our own facilities manager, like, that would be a decision that we could make. We wouldn't have to wait for an SU decision.
I would still want to provide the opportunity to have the bigger conversation there, but if there wasn't interest to do it at the SU level, you certainly could direct us to put that in this budget.
I just see a greater opportunity for, I don't know how to word this. I would personally prefer to see one just for NMV. I mean, that's K-8 buildings, that's a lot. And then the prioritization, when you look at small schools compared to large schools, who gets the top billing? Sometimes, do you know what I'm trying to say? Sometimes
I do.
I just would want to keep it in-house for small buildings who sometimes we have less staff on board for custodial. I don't know. I just personally think I would like to hire
hear what you say. Our goal in the hiring process would be to make sure that we were hiring someone who had that capacity to understand that the size isn't what drives it as much as the need would drive it. So we would be looking for someone not to have, you know, a preference and be favoring one or the other. And I still would be responsible for the supervision piece so that I could navigate that to make sure that that wasn't happening as well. But I do hear what you're saying.
Thank you.
So I thought maybe I would have something to talk about under hiring, but I don't. We're still looking for a school counselor in Bakersfield. The good news is Rhoda has an interview on Thursday.
Yes.
And
Possibly.
yeah. So we're hoping we'll have someone hired by the time we come back around to the next board meeting. So I'm going to ask you to extend my authority to hire away from the table. Because you had given me that authority through the summer, and unfortunately we didn't find someone, so I would like you to extend it so that we don't have to wait to come back around to this board in October to make it formal. So could you grant me authority?
You want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mary.
Is there any way we could look at information before that hire happens? Like, is there anybody on the hiring committee?
We haven't really talked about that, but
no.
typically in Bakersfield especially, there's been one board member that has weighed in and come in and sat in on the hiring. So do you already have that scheduled for Thursday?
I do, but I could, yeah. Anyone?
Well, I don't want you to lose the candidate because
Yeah,
I know it's really
exactly.
important.
Yeah.
I also know that's quite a position, especially has been a revolving door in our building. I want to just make sure that at least, I mean, you do a nice job vetting, but sometimes some eyes
Another
out of the
perspective.
community might know some.
Are you interested potentially, Erin?
I don't think I can. It depends on when it happens.
Do you know when it
and
is?
Thursday at 3.
I have faculty meetings on Thursdays, so I wouldn't be able to. So.
Thanks, but sorry.
Are you okay with this time?
We had 3 apply when we put out the position again. We advertised, and one of them is a definite no. The other one,
And just remind you to be careful not to do anything
Yep.
identifiable here.
Yeah.
Hiring is one of our executive pieces.
yeah, and the other 2, you know, we narrowed it down to one that made sense.
So I think that you could send out the application package. So would that
Just a bit.
be just to look? So
Yep.
we'll have Rhoda send that out so you can all see who the candidate is and
Yeah, can do
Okay.
that.
You want a motion?
You
yes.
made the motion.
Oh, you did make the motion. Sorry, we were in discussion. Can we vote now, ladies? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I have nothing under student and nothing under other. Right. No, that's
Whole
not
section
true.
under board.
That I do, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
I do have one other thing under other. So, we have a couple of you are on our policy committee. So in May and June, we were working really hard with our SAP counselor from Enosburg, our SAP counselor from Richford Junior Senior High School.
Sorry, help me with SAP.
Student Assistance Program. So
Okay.
alcohol, tobacco, other drugs.
Thank you.
Counselor. They had recommended some changes to what used to be our substance abuse policy. And we've worked with them in May and June, and then they worked on some things throughout the summer, and we've gotten much closer to the whole both the policy and the procedure. The hope that I had was that we could have finished in June so that we could have been live with this policy at the start of the year. My worry is we're going to have a violation of this policy, and right now what is living is our existing policy. And we found that it was that policy was incredibly rigid, and there was not latitude to put student-centered services and restorative practices in place with how the old policy was. So the hope was to provide greater latitude so that we could really focus on treatment of the student without them losing their educational access during that time. So these folks did an incredible amount of work. Your policy committee members saw today for the first time, they saw what the policy itself looks like. So that's what you're seeing here that I'm passing around. So this policy today was approved by the FNE issue policy committee. So even though it doesn't have the FNE issue heading for policy and it doesn't have little check boxes on the bottom, I'm presenting this policy to you for first round approval. And I'm doing it because I really want to get this policy in place because it gives us some greater latitude about those restorative approaches for kids. So I'd ask you to read through that. Questions? Any questions or comments?
The fifth paragraph down, it says student possession is defined as including a student who has alcohol or drugs on their personal property or has such substance under the control or has knowingly placed themselves in proximity with a person known to have alcohol or drugs on their person or under their control. Can you just explain the proximity piece?
Can I explain the proximity piece? Let me look at our old policy. I believe that was a continuation of proximity. So if you are knowingly putting yourself in a vehicle with someone that's smoking marijuana, but you're saying, I didn't smoke marijuana, it's still a violation because you have chosen to go be where that person is using the substance. So I think that I can remember a couple of circumstances years ago where a kiddo fell under that kind of proximity place. So it puts accountability on others not to be near as well.
But so that student could actually be not like charged, but whatever the word is, with possession.
It would fall under the possession part of the policy. Yes.
How does the school prove that the kid knew?
We have our ways.
I know. And I know that as adults we probably know,
It
but
would be just like any other investigation for, a fight or anything else like that. You would do the investigation, you'd figure it out, you would try really hard to get to a place where you were confident that this is what happened based on the sources. And a principal's not going to bring someone through this if they're not certain that this has happened. And
it would just be, again, more for accountability to the whole group or to that child who...
When it doesn't mean that child's going to be suspended necessarily, there'll be a process, like some sort of restorative approach that you would take with that child. So they're not making the best choices even if they're not choosing to smoke the marijuana or drink the Bud Light. They're still going with people who are doing it. So the work would be around helping that child to repair that and prevent that from being a choice that they make in the future.
Or I'll say the slightly more cynical and or realistic version of that is if we didn't really have that language, whoever you caught on hand is the only one you could really work with.
Right.
And we're like,
right.
Come on.
You were all there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would be on school grounds or school sponsored events or buses.
All of it.
Things within the school's purview. Okay.
I just had a question around the med administration from faculty or what have you.
Can you tell me where?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs down.
It's bold.
Yeah, in bold. Just curious, if there's a student that is coming to school with a prescription, is there some sort of med training for that identified person? And do they have a med sheet to track the ones?
The only person that can give meds is the school nurse, unless the school nurse has done a med training and designated. Like Rachel will train Lenny, and then she'll sign off that he is a designee and can administer medication. She'll train Brandy and make sure she knows and she can administer medication. This is a really strict part of, because everything that they do with the medication falls under that nurse's license. So they have to make sure that they're training and tracking who has the authority to do that. Even when you go on a school field trip. So if you end up having to put a chaperone in charge, they have to see the nurse and just to sign off that they know how to administer the medication.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have like 2 minor typos.
Okay.
They're not really typos. I think something was maybe flipped out.
We were typing it on the fly at the meeting, so it might, well, not
Lisa
really.
is
We were
our
making the
resident
changes.
editor. She's excellent.
Keep up.
Okay. Okay. So what I'm looking for is approval on this, and I would say with Lisa's changes. So in the 3rd paragraph, it says for those students using drugs, it should say or alcohol. In the 6th paragraph, it's just a deleting an and. Participation in these activities is voluntary, therefore students will be expected. It's deleting the and. It was just those 2, Lisa. So it asks for the approval with those corrections.
Does somebody want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion to
Thank you.
accept this X16 policy.
As our first review, that's what we're calling this?
This is the first review.
Yes.
Yep. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
That's all I have until the end.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my agenda. Principals. Okay. I am gonna take some liberty as the chair and let's see. I feel like Lenny went first last time and he has the gift of gab and he took a lot of our time and some of our other members didn't get to
is that a
speak
pattern?
as eloquently as you did. So I was gonna have Sandy go first, but I can't remember who went last time, and Christy wasn't there at all.
So
should we
last, but Lynn read her report.
So would you like to go
on video.
first, Christy?
Sure, mine's really short.
Okay, even better.
Mine's always short. Just so you know. Gabby.
We appreciate everything.
Can't hear your
Yes.
boy up here. Can't.
Mine's toward the end. since the last time we met, which I wasn't here, we finished up, well, I thought we had finished up some hiring, but then we didn't. So we hired our middle school special educator, our pre-K special educator, which we share with Richford, and a para-educator. We still have 2 para-educators that have not been hired. I do have interviews next week. There was a student issue, which really I talked about with Lynn, but I was just wondering if there had been preschoolers who have ever ridden the bus in other places, but she shared with me no. Apparently in the past that has happened in Sheldon. This
There's a no in our district.
This
It's not our
particular
district, and the bus company, the bus company is very adamant
And that's a
about the
big
safety piece, and it is a lot for the one driver to manage all the kids plus 3 and 4-year-olds that don't like to sit in them. It's been a hard no.
As it turns out, our buses right now are very full. So it would not, I can't.
Still not a choice.
I can't quite imagine.
Yep.
We have had, I always think that this is interesting, we've had 18 students transfer out, and we had 18 students transfer in.
Isn't that funny how that happens?
That's nice.
And
When it
each
happens like
year
that.
that I've been at Sheldon, it's been about the same. It's by 1 or 2, it's almost. And sometimes we get all nervous because we're like, oh, look at all the kids leaving, but then they just keep coming. So we're at about 290. We completed the summer work that we had planned on in terms of safety and security. We installed a bus camera on one of our buses, just kind of as a pilot program to see how that will go. It's only day 4, 5, I mean, so I don't know yet. It is the bus that we had the most, happened to be the route that we had the most issues on, so I was hoping it would, shorten my investigation time.
Do the children know? It's obvious now
Yes.
that there's a camera on the
Yes.
bus.
Yeah.
Plus, is it posted? It must have to be posted. Does it have to be posted on buses?
There's a little thing
Sign,
above that
yeah,
says,
yeah.
Smile. Camera and, yeah, they don't, no one pays any attention at all.
Of course, of course.
They're like, oh yeah, okay,
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah. I think they think that it's watching the driver.
Even
I don't
better
know.
for you.
I know, it's very interesting. And we did the, I did forget something. We did the whole staff Alice training with, so Lynn and Robin Gagne came and they worked with Chris Comstock, who's done a lot of the safety and security work in Sheldon. And so they did the whole staff Alice training, and it went really well.
That's great.
And then the third thing, which I didn't add on here, I apologize, is we had part of our the safety grant that we got last year, which mostly put new doors in our K4 wing that never had doors before. We installed a lockdown button at the front desk.
Nice.
So by both the front desk staff members' desks, there is a button to lock down our K4 and middle school wings. So it releases, so you don't have to pull the fire alarm, it releases the magnetic locks for those doors, so that's nice. It doesn't, the front part is still open because there isn't a place where that locks down, but where most of our students are, it will lock down, so that was a nice addition to that.
Is that one button closes both those wings at the same time, or can you do it separate?
Nope, it does both at the same time. I know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if it could be, but that might take more time too. Right. What do I want to close? Coming events, we have our open house on September 12th. We do a barbecue in conjunction with the Sheldon Fire Department, so that's free to all our families.
That is such a great idea.
And then we
That's
used
so
to
cool.
do spaghetti dinner, but
Oh, yeah.
we changed to fire department. This year they're bringing their new fire truck, which we just got last year, so the kids will be really
Super
pumped about
stoked.
that.
That's awesome.
Love that.
It is
idea.
it is very well attended. Very well
And when you have a fire truck, how could it not?
A fire truck and you know, food,
Mhm.
and you know, you get to go around and meet the teachers. So it's a happening place. Please stop by if you'd like. There's also a book fair. Soccer season starts. Our first game's on the 16th. Our PTO meets the first week of every month, usually on Tuesdays. Our school photos are October 9th. And then our first set of parent conferences are in the evening on October 16th and 17th. In the fall, we usually get about 97% attendance for our fall parent conferences, so they are pretty popular. And then because I wasn't here last time, and I don't think I knew, I attached our master schedule, the middle school schedule, and our staff handbook, which I reworked. And thank you, Sandy, for sending yours to just give me something else to look at. I appreciated that. And I think that according to Dominic, our schedule is far more complicated than most, so I apologize for that, but that's what it is. Take a look at it. And, we did make a few changes this year. We have a built-in intervention time, 20 minutes for math, 20 minutes for English, for language arts. It can be, sometimes those are back-to-back, sometimes they are attached to math or literacy, depending on the grade level. For our younger students, they're not attached. They need some time away from that, and then maybe can come back for 20 minutes. For some of our older students, it ends up being back-to-back. So that we can have our interventionists push in at that time, and each grade level it's dedicated so that they don't have to try to be in two places, because we have an interventionist and K-8 school. So that was a change. We did something like that last year, but we refined that this year, so that's a great change. And our other big change to the schedule was that in the middle school they went for a longer block of time, and they are being pretty flexible about how they're using that, but they are going with a 90-minute block, and they see their middle school students every other day. They don't sit in language arts for 90 minutes. You know, they do a lot of different kinds of things. So that's Monday through Thursday, and then on Friday they have a shorter block and they see all of their students. So this is the first year they're doing it. It came from them. They really wanted to try to run their schedule that way. And so I'm gonna give it a whirl. See what happens.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Not related to your schedule, but I wonder how, I feel like I know from some previous experience that your PTO is really active. Is that the case? Yeah.
They're very small, like only 4 or 5 people.
Oh, okay. That makes me feel better.
But they do, their main focus is that they do a lot of family activities.
Mhm.
So every month there is an activity somehow.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a sledding party. Other times it's a wellness activity.
Right.
It's a pizza and movie night. Right.
Right,
They have
right.
different things
Do
every
they do
month.
fundraising for
Yep.
it? Yeah.
Yep. So next week we're doing a mum fundraiser through Clausen's.
Yep, yep.
That actually is quite a profitable.
From Clausen's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They deliver up.
Very cool.
They'll deliver, and then after that they'll do a Yankee candle, and they do spirit wear, which is really popular.
Yep.
Everybody wants a Sheldon shirt.
Sure do.
This year we have water bottles. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's cool.
So they are small, but they're pretty active.
It's like they're mighty.
Yeah. They have a Facebook page.
Yeah.
Just Sheldon PT, and you can see everything that they do.
That's
and
cool.
Ask us for ideas, and
Yeah.
it's pretty
They
cool.
run, sometimes they run like little contests. So on Green Up Day, they, if you post a picture of your family or your kids cleaning up, you get put into a drawing. And they'll do that during school vacations, especially February. Like if you come to school and use the sliding hill or something, post your picture and they'll pick.
Gotcha.
So.
The reason I ask is the Bakersfield one has had its ups and downs, and
Yeah.
it is very small, and yours seems pretty vibrant, so I'm interested to hear that it must be a very dedicated group of small.
It is.
Even if it is small.
It is.
Okay. Sandy?
My turn?
Thank you, Christine.
Okay, under personnel, there's been some discussion about tech support. I've never had a designated tech support person in Montgomery, and I know that Rhoda, I think you just lost your halftime, was it, I don't know what it was, but
Wasn't even that.
anyway, I know there's some discussion about maybe us sharing a tech person, so more to come on that, but I think that I have been exchanging some emails with Dominic, and I think we just needed to talk about some things before we got that
Yeah, and I think that
job description together.
from Dominic's perspective, there's a need because he
doesn't have
loves
time
hanging
for
out in Montgomery. He loves hanging out in Bakersfield.
For
but
4
there's-
years, he's been hanging out.
It's hard for him to do the work that he's supposed to
Yeah,
do
right.
organizationally
Yeah.
if we don't have some sort of building level support. So I think that looking at it through the lens of how can you share that resource, one, it makes the position more attractive
Yeah.
than what you originally had. If you could do
Right.
something together
Yeah,
to get someone there, I
That'd be
think
great.
that would be
Yeah,
really
I felt
good.
it
Thanks for
last
coming.
year
Thank you.
with all the work he had
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
I couldn't bother him, so we were having a tough time. So that's something that's coming up. I'm also looking for a part-time custodian again. Last year, right around this time, we had a full-time custodian who retired at age 75. He had longevity with us, knew the building very, very well. Didn't even attempt, we advertised for full-time, but didn't get any takers. And then I also realized that there really isn't anyone out there that's gonna be able to do everything that he knew how to do for our building. So I just tried to fill a big need, which was evenings of trash vacuuming and bathrooms. And someone to be closing down after basketball games and things like that. So I've had 2 different people so far, and the person I have now would really rather not be doing it. He has young children, missing out on games and things like that. So I'm meeting with someone tomorrow, so I do have a prospect. So we'll see how that goes. Activities and events, I'm really pleased to say that I contracted with Up for Learning through grant, our SRSA grant for restorative practices training, and they came and trained our entire staff. Did not have the bus drivers there, our 2 bus drivers did not attend, but our entire staff, there were 32 people during in-service for a half a day. It was really more than I expected. So a culture changing kind of atmosphere, and I guess I never realized what an impact it would have on the adults. I really thought this is how it's for kids, and this is how it's going to just change our culture, but it's for the adults too. It's for all of us. It's just a way of being. So anyway, I have now after that we will have 3 retreats in our building with approximately 4 adults on the team and about 8 middle school students. I've had 4 adults already sign up to do it, and we're trying to figure out how to choose 8 middle school kids because it's really hard to just what's the criteria. And so we'll do those 3 retreats, and then they're also coming back to 2 of our Critical Friends meetings throughout the year to just make sure our whole staff again, to make sure we're still, if we have any questions, we're still moving forward and so forth, just to guide us. So that's, I'm really happy with how that all went through in service. Our LEAPS program, our after-school program, starts up Monday, September 16th. Our first soccer game's Tuesday, September 17th at home. I'm also pleased to say that we have a lot of community support, and our Montgomery Conservation Commission is providing us with VINS, which is Vermont Institute of Natural Science. They provide us the programming, it's amazing, and it's the Raptor show this time, but they do it in 2 separate sessions. So they'll do a young group and then they'll do the older kids, and the people are just they're so talented that they change up the way they speak, they change up their language, and they fine tune it for the younger crowd and the older crowd. It's very enjoyable on that Friday afternoon. And we have a book fair coming on the week of October 1st. Building maintenance, just talking about this whole facilities thing. This exterior metal door replacement, I tried to get done all summer long. So trying to get the people to call you back, trying to get the people to give you pricing. And it's a metal door outside the art room that the water bounces on this just cement step and comes up and rots it. And so the metal door is all rusted on the sides. Our custodian has done the blown in insulation stuff, so we've got all this stuff that looks like it's oozing out of the sides of the door. But the guy showed up today. We had no idea when he was gonna come. They kept saying, we'll be there next week, we'll be there next week. He showed up today, so.
Hallelujah.
I had no idea. I put it on the agenda because it's just a luck of the draw when you're gonna get someone to come and do something. We've been waiting to have speakers in the gym moved because they keep getting hit by kickballs. And that, I'm still waiting. That was supposed to happen in the summer too. So, to be continued. I switched it up this year, and we previously had a school-based NCSS school-based counselor in our building on Mondays for part of a day, not even quite a half a day, that could see about 4 students for about 45 minutes apiece. We had a contract with them each year for a minimal amount. It wasn't a too big of an amount of money, but to service our kids, and it was important that we had that. And there was some transition there. Things weren't working as well, and I talked to this counselor at Healthy Minds in Enosburg. Her name is Alexis Campbell. She is amazing. So I talked to her about, hey, if I could provide you some office space on a day a week, would you like to meet your clients here? So she's right now got at least 4, and she's doing intake with 2 more. She's planning to spend all day Monday in our building, and even stay through 5 o'clock through the LEAPS program if it's more convenient for families.
Yes, that's great.
And then there's some existing customers that she had, and since we had a couple of Mondays, we didn't start on a Monday, and we had a Monday holiday, she's like, can I come in for 3 Fridays? So she's using the guidance office. It's available on Mondays and Fridays, and I'm thrilled. So far, so good. And it's great to be able to say, I recommend this student. I call the parent. They do all the intake together. It's totally off my plate. But they sign a release so that if there's things happening at school, I'm able to give that input to the counselor. So I'm really happy with the way it's starting out. I did bring student and staff handbooks for approval. I have hard copies, but I also shared it, scanned it with Doreen and asked her to send it to the board members. So I don't know if you really want the hard copies or see it in your email. It's totally up to you. And the SBAC scores I put on here, I was having trouble accessing. I think did you get something that said that
It was
it's
down,
down?
right? It was down.
So I wasn't able to pull everything off of there that I needed. It's down for
next time,
a given amount of time, so I'll bring that next time. So handbooks is all, I don't know.
So maybe we could do so I know Christy brought a handbook.
Hers was on.
So we can approve them all at the end, if that's okay. We'll just do it globally.
Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Sandy or comments? Okay. Rhoda?
All right, so we talked about the guidance counselor piece already, so we can move on from that. And we need a tech person. So that's personnel. Moving on. Buildings and grounds. So I know that we had talked last time about moving or having that additional shed. I have contacted one other person to get us a quote. He hasn't got it back to me, but that will be coming. And then we have another person to call that we're gonna get the second quote or the third quote from. So those are still kind of out there. And Morgan and I were gonna talk paving, and we haven't got that far yet, so.
I've been on this board for like a long time, and we've been talking about paving
Paving.
since I joined, so
It's
no
okay.
rush.
No
Yeah.
pressure. Month 2 is what she's saying.
We did have Fred's Energy come, and they replaced a couple of zone valves in our building, and when they were doing that, they realized that all of our zone valves are not the way they should be. So
That's an 8.
it's an 8. So they did up a quote for me about what it would take to replace. There are 25 of these zone valves in our building. So it's quite a few, plus a boiler drain. Their feeling is that this is something that probably needs to be done. I guess when the original ones, I won't do this justice, but when the original ones were put in, they are open all the time, and so they had to like then put in a mechanism to shut them down, and so it wasn't done the way it should have been done in the first place. So
You're like the exclamation point at the end of the
Why we need
Why we need a building
She's like, here's what he told me. I'm just regurgitating it. I don't really know
I
these
have
words
no
I'm
idea.
using. Yeah.
exactly.
So didn't we go down this road?
I feel like
We've been playing with the system for so long.
I know.
Yeah.
Do we know when the last time that was looked at?
Like,
won't know, but
I don't,
Anissa
but-
did zone valve work.
Yes, and what
which makes me wonder: are you being real?
well, and what Fred said is that there have been several. They can tell that there have been lots of different companies in there and have given different information.
Yes.
So part of my feeling around this whole thing is we need to stick with one company.
Yeah.
right?
Fred's, I really
And-
like Fred's. They've
yeah.
been good to us.
And what I like about Fred's is they also have helped my custodian understand the process. And people in the past that have been there have not always helped her do that, to really understand. So I think that that's an important piece to all of this. However, the quote is $8,843. So we probably need more than one quote because it's above that $5,000.
Right.
But that's the quote I have currently, and so I need to get some other quotes and have some people come in.
Fred's is your propane contractor for the school though.
Yeah.
They converted
So
me
it,
too from oil
you
to
know,
propane.
it's interesting because most propane people won't work on another company's system. So I just wonder if this falls outside that kind of getting 3 bids, because AmeriGas isn't likely to come in and mess with valves if it's connected to a system that Fred's is already kind of owns the tank or, you know, whatever, and has done all the installation. That's been my experience at the homeowner level. Whether it's like different at the commercial level, I don't know, but
These are valves in the building in the heat, by your
Yes.
heat exchanges in the
Yes.
building though, right? So
Yes.
they're in each of the rooms, not
Opening and
necessarily
closing to let
right.
the
It's
heat in
not
and stuff,
related
yeah.
to the propane system specifically.
it's your heating system
Right.
overall. So it's not necessarily just about the propane coming
Yeah.
in. So they can't really
Okay.
say that no one else can work on your heating units.
True,
Like that's
okay.
your.
So it's
But I
separate.
do know what you're saying. If it was
If
specific,
it was, I was
just-
thinking tank lines,
Yeah.
I was thinking
Yeah.
valves related to the tank, not to the heating.
Yeah.
It's the whole-
The heating system, which is more the HVAC side of
Do you have any
things,
insights?
right?
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing that I would add to it is that if you put forward a good faith effort to get 2 other bids and they're
don't
saying,
come
no,
through,
we're not
yeah.
gonna do it, then you've met the requirement. I think Mary's right, you're maybe not gonna get an AmeriGas to bid on it, but you'll get someone like John Mercy who's done work in your building before,
Right.
someone who's not associated with the selling of the commodity. You can get some
Right.
folks who will do that.
And then I wonder if we could, go back to whoever did the previous work that Aaron and I are remembering and
Well, I think it's
inquire
even from
from
my work
them
time.
too.
When I worked in the building, I feel like we had to move things for heating stuff, but
Yeah.
who knows? That was more years than I want to.
So maybe there's a little bit of a resource there if we can go back into not that far, like 18 months.
Dan probably would know.
Yeah. A former board member
Yeah,
who
I
was
know
fairly
Dan is.
knowledgeable and very knowledgeable in this world was really helpful.
Could you give him a call and just
Yep.
see, like, tell him what they're saying and see if
Yep.
he remembers doing any of that
Yeah.
work previously?
Yeah.
That'd
Yeah,
be-
I can do that.
He would be a good resource. That's what you lost when we lost them, and you're stuck with Aaron and I, who also don't understand 50% of this lingo.
So that's that. And I will give him a call. Okay, upcoming events and professional development. So I think things are off to a great start. Staff seem to be very happy. We had a good leadership team meeting at just before school started, and we will be having another one next week. But the staff, we had a restorative circle at our staff meeting this week, and they all seem to feel like it's a good start to the year, so that's good. Our open house is August 26th, and we're going to add on to that our annual Title I meeting. So
September?
August, yes.
Okay.
September. Did I write? I did write August.
I was
Okay.
just went to double check that. I'm like,
Yeah,
I think I
no,
missed
it's
that.
September.
You missed it.
It's me. I'm still stuck in August. Okay, September 26th. And we're going to do our annual Title I meeting, and we were talking about ways that we could get the community to come in and be a part of that meeting. And I like this barbecue.
I was gonna say
idea.
free chicken barbecue.
Yeah. We'll talk a little more about that.
Fire department, I don't know, free fire department.
We had picture day today. I didn't put that on here, but that was fun. In the rain. We made it in between clouds to go out and do our full school picture.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sandy Stanhope is going to be coming to work with our teachers. I also put August there apparently, but that's September too, September 20th. And she's hopefully going to be coming 4 times throughout the year to work with our teachers in math. Emma Stevens, who is one of our interventionists, is also a part of the VMI group, which is Vermont Math Institute. She'll be helping her with her math skills and helping our staff as she comes back to share that with us. And I put on here, this is just because Lenny talked about Waddington, and so I have to talk about my thing too.
Well played, Rhoda. Well played.
So I'm a part of So I'm a part of the Snelling School Leadership Institute, which is very similar to Waddington, but is Vermont based. It does a lot of the same kind of work. And Val Gardner kind of leads that. And I'm also part of the principals cohort with Jay Nichols. And I brought our handbook, and I did not bring a copy of our schedule, but what I want to talk about in our schedule is we've made an intentional push to have a team meeting and a PLC meeting for all teachers each week. In the team meetings, they're really focused on a kind of EST meeting, so they're talking kid specific, what can they do to help kids that are struggling. And in their PLC time, they're working with our coaches and really focusing around instructional shifts. They also all have meetings with the coaches individually, and we have been intentional about having an intervention time for all teachers in our schedule. Mindfulness, we also built in 10 minutes of mindfulness either before lunch and recess or after lunch and recess, depending on the grade levels. Another shift this year for, speaking of lunch and recess, is that we have a back-to-back lunch and recess. So our elementary level kids are going out to recess first and then coming into lunch, and while they're at recess, our middle school is having lunch and then they're going out. Which allowed us to have more time for some of these other things we wanted to have in the schedule. And seems to be working really well, other than the glitch of the first 2 days where we realized our elementary lunch had way too many kids in it. So 5th grade is now with the middle school. But that has worked out really beautifully. And then I've got our handbook, and I didn't make too many changes in that. I made some changes around the bus conduct piece, which was a SU change. I took out a piece on music that felt, when I read it, to me like it was a job description for the music teacher rather than something that needed to be in the handbook. So we shortened that up a little bit. I made sure that there was some things around hazing, harassing, and bullying that were in compliance with what the policy and the laws are, and made sure that that was all the way it should be, but everything else is pretty much the same. My leadership team is going to work on the mission vision throughout the year. They, along with myself, felt like it needed some updating and some work, so we're going to work on that throughout the year. And also having more restorative language in the handbook itself. But those are the big things.
Nice. Questions or comments for Rhoda? Okay, Lenny. I think we're ready for you.
Oh goodness. So if you were the, I don't want to be on camera. It's good. Come on. If you were the
The
exclamation
camera
point,
is still going, just so you know.
I know,
you
I
can
said
hear
someone
me.
move it,
You can
I'm
hear me.
running.
So you were the exclamation point. I'll be like the PS addition to the whole buildings and grounds piece. So some stuff I can speak to. Other stuff I'm gonna kind of just say we're still working it out. But the gym floor was waxed. It's always amazing how much that costs to have done. But then it reminds me of why we get so paranoid and upset when anybody walks on there with things that they shouldn't have on. But it looks great, and we do a great job. The kiddos themselves also take a lot of pride in that too. So it's a very special part of our building, and everyone is pretty protective of it. So that's good. That might have been a culture set by my predecessor.
I might be pretty, I really like that gym floor too. I'm partial to it.
So this next thing, I believe I talked last time about some concerns around the hot water temperature control, and that there was some of the costs were going to be done essentially pro bono by TMI, Thomas Mechanical, because it was connected to the HVAC. Of course, as we took a closer look at it, Mark Larrabee, who I mentioned last time, noticed there are some other bigger concerns. So we had a larger conversation with TMI around what needs to be done. Of course, they came by and they claimed to have done some stuff. And I'm now knowing I don't know much, and Mark knows a lot and speaks the language a little better. I told him to come back in and check again. And he was like, they did half of the stuff we agreed to in the previous agreement. So we were kind of going back and forth with them. It almost looked like somebody came in, got halfway through, and then went home. Like there's some stuff like insulation hasn't been finished being wrapped, kind of stuff. So we're not necessarily. I received a bill,
Bakersfield, that happened.
but I also am concerned that why did I receive a bill if it's pretty clear that someone's work's not done. So we're working on having that conversation. And needless to say, I really hate this because I feel like if I was super informed, I'd probably be a little bit more aggressive around what's being done, but I also feel like I could get worked over because I don't really know everything. But I'm using Mark as my person to help out with that. They did do one thing, which is they bled the heating system because it's still an older school and there's still places that run cooler than others, and they bled the whole system to get out any of the air leaks out, and some of them may have even arisen when they actually put in some control valves last year, and they didn't bleed the whole system when they did it that time. They also refilled the glycol, and that was like a $400 process right there. Other building and ground thing, much simpler. We use some of our small school, SRSA, what's the other S stand for?
Small rural schools.
Yeah. Funds to purchase, it was about $3,000 to purchase a climbing wall. So that's TBD on delivery, but we're going to be installing a climbing wall in the gym on the side opposite the bleachers. And it's going to be 20 feet long, about 8 feet high, and it's safe because obviously you can't climb too high, but it's going to be a great addition to both PE programming, but also a lot of other different just physical movement opportunities for kiddos and for staff, because it's one of those things that actually gets exponentially more difficult the bigger you are. So that would be kind of fun when we do a staff challenge and put the mats down and say, let's have some fun. And unfortunately, my staff might be a little too competitive, so there will probably be a couple injuries, but we've had our...
Staff.
You nervous?
Wait, your staff?
Yes.
You mean you when you say that?
I mean, I might set the tone sometimes, but...
So we'll make sure that we talk about the the biz bit and the safety and harness and all of those pieces.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of that tangent, Mr. Bose was cleaning through his PE closet and he found a hockey cage, a face mask, and he's like, I don't have any use for it. So then Randy Shagnon, who was my Secret Santa last year, and she bought me chattering teeth and a hockey puck with a hockey puck in the tooth, she then ran up and gave me the cage. So I've got my hockey cage for next season.
Good.
So then I'm allowed to play. That was the discussion with the
It was like
significant
almost a
other.
year. He was like,
This is something I want to, I don't know if I necessarily need approval, but I want to give it as an FYI, and it wasn't in my original notes, but Lyndon came to me Our floor cleaner is on the fritz again. This was something we dealt with as an issue last year around the batteries, and it became definitely a safety issue because when we were plugging it in to recharge, it wasn't charging properly, it wasn't shutting off properly, and the batteries were overheating to the point that they were like almost boiling acid.
Is this the ride-on? We've
Yes, the
struggled with
ride-on
that for
one.
years.
We've been struggling with it for years. It's
Yeah.
pretty old, so the conversation I asked him to do was find out exactly how long we've had it, and he said it's at least longer than he's been here. And how much mileage have we gotten out of it, and then what's the cost of a new one. So we're working on those numbers, but I think it's pretty expensive to get a new one, but we spent $1,200 last year. We're probably gonna spend another $1,200 this year. So I wanna do a little bit of, before we go down that road, I wanna see what the cost feasibility is, and it might be like a $7,000 purchase potentially, if we have the funds for it. But I wanna make sure that's something that is the right use of our investments if we keep chasing this thing, because now there's an issue with it's not really picking up the water, and it's not really even cleaning, it's just kind of like moving some liquid around. So that's kind of a sanitary issue too. And it's obviously an efficiency thing because you can get a lot more done on that ride-on than you can if you're pushing around the
I'm gonna guess that's at least 10 or 12 years old. I bought that.
So it might be fair to say we've gotten our mileage out of it. Maybe it's time for a new one.
It's at the beater stage if it were a car, right?
Exactly, right? Okay, so that's all I got for building and grounds. For personnel, the last time we spoke, I was missing a paraprofessional, I was missing a LEAP site coordinator, and I was missing a math interventionist. And by some miracles, I managed to find people for both of them.
Good
One
job.
was a two birds, one stone, so we hired Jennifer Webb to be a paraprofessional, and she's also going to be our LEAP site coordinator. So we're really excited about them. She recently moved here. She's a mother of 2 kids in the building, and so far so good with that addition. She actually interviewed for the paraprofessional position. She came off so articulate, put together, thoughtful, well managed, et cetera, that I was like, as we're in the interview, I'm like, I don't want to tell you you're getting the job, but you should also apply for this other job while you're here. So that worked out really well. And then we hired Mark Van Buren, who was working at Edmonds Middle School, and I also think he was at Hunt Middle School in Burlington for the last couple of years as he was getting his teaching license. So he's going to be our math interventionist. He's going to focus on the 3rd through upper middle school.
Grant funded?
Yes, I was going to say that is grant funded, which means later on this year when we get to budget, we're probably going to have a conversation about maybe hopefully moving that position into the local funds. As the grant, there's always a concern around having grant funds because those can shift year to year. And there's also that element, I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but there's also that element of when you're grant funded, there's a time when you kind of sit there and don't actually have a job for next year, and it makes it really hard to retain quality candidates. So then for curriculum and learning, there were some other small school small school fund investments. We bought some Do the Math kits, which are going to help with some differentiation during our success groups and our targeted intervention practices in mathematics. We bought another addition in multiplicative reasoning for now, but I kind of shared some of those funds to a couple different individuals in the building saying, hey, we got some money available, what can we buy with it? And after we go through this first round of purchasing, if we still have some more money available, we might finish off. So we have kind of the whole collective Do the Math kits. Those are super helpful and effective for teachers trying to do any sort of mathematics, particularly around the differentiation and remediation for students during our success group time. Again, the PE climbing wall was purchased using the small school funds. And then for the middle school at the 7th and 8th grade level, we were working on completing the units of study. They didn't have 7th and 8th grade one. They only had like one as of like last year. So it was a little bit more difficult for our teachers who we were asking to do the readers, writers workshop when they didn't necessarily have any fully fleshed out units to work off of. So it was really imperative to get those. Plus I have new teachers at the middle school level, so it's going to be a great resource for them as well. Then we also used some of the small school funds and some Title II funds to pay for, how many teachers did I say? I think it was around 10 teachers or 10 staff members, some paraeducators and some teachers to get life space crisis intervention training. That was an idea that popped into my behavior support team's head kind of midway through the year when we talked about how we're slowly going to want to move towards restorative practices in our school. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of need in our school around children with trauma and other needs. just generally everyone has some behavioral challenges, and life-based crisis intervention training helps educate and make the staff a little more skillful about how to take those moments when a kid struggles and turn them into effective learning opportunities, both de-escalating but also then the growing learning piece of it. And my thought halfway through that training was, I'm going to probably have every teacher go through this in the next couple of years, because all the teachers who did it were like, oh my god, everyone else would really benefit from this too. So that was really valuable. And then I applied for the Restorative Practices Collaborative, which is, it's kind of that's the new buzzword in Vermont, is restorative practices. And recently the state came together to create this Restorative Practices Collaborative. And by applying for it, hopefully our school will be rewarded, and there's going to be some technical assistance, some professional development, and some other resources that will come our way to help our school implement restorative practices, learn and implement them. I didn't necessarily floating in service was something I just added in here. I don't know did we ever talk about that with these?
I don't think we need to at this level.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, I was just going to say that's something, our first one comes up on the 25th, so we're going to have a chance to.
Oh, you mean your plan?
Yes,
I
our
thought you meant your
plan.
date. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. You should tell them. Sorry.
Yeah, I was like, I think I'm supposed to talk about this. So,
I can't remember if we'd said anything before, so.
yeah. So anyway, Bakersfield and Berkshire are going to be collaborating around some professional learning communities. It's challenging when you're in a silo and you're kind of the only teacher in your grade level or your content area, and it's hard to have really powerful, effective collaboration when you're the only one kind of in that context. So last year I started Anissa and I started the conversation, and then Rhoda's carried over with me, where we've, in lieu of a day of in-service, which sometimes are productive, but at the same time we feel like this is an even bigger need, having that chance to collaborate with teachers who are in the trenches doing the same work. We set up 3 floating in-service days over the course of the fall into early winter, where teachers will be meeting and collaborating around specific grade level content area stuff. And our first one is Wednesday the 25th.
That's cool.
Yeah, it should be fun, and I mean, I've tried to frame it with everybody, and this is what almost everything in education is a pilot, right? So there are definitely going to be some snafus and challenges around this because it's after school hours, which can be challenging for some families versus others, and try to present it as, let's make this an opportunity, let's not make this something that is combative or challenging, like union head kind of thing. And none of my staff responded that way, but I could tell a few felt frustrated or worried that they weren't going to be able to like meet those expectations of being there for all those hours. But we're going to be flexible about some of this might be more of a get your work done by this time, have a way to track and have that work documented. Because I don't think certain people, some people recently had children. It's going to be really hard for them to find that extra daycare on top of all the other daycare that they have. So I want to make sure we collaborate and support those teachers and make sure this is something that's meaningful and productive. Rather than, what this is really replacing is that end of year in service, which I'm going to say this as a former teacher, is one of those like, let's take a deep breath and relax. It's not really a great time for me to say, hey, we're going to really dig in deeply about this new practice that you're not going to do for the next 3 months because you're on summer break, and then come back and then apply it. So we figured this might be a more efficient use of that in-service time. I don't necessarily, do we have a memo about like talking about schedule, or just everybody collaborated and didn't tell me like, hey, be ready to talk about schedule?
Your events and expectations checklist.
It was. Well, so technically I talked about mine last time, so I'm ahead.
Just sharing your master schedule.
Yeah, I don't remember
It's in
seeing that. I
August.
saw the aspects. Oh, it was in August. I was looking at September.
Yeah, see,
So we're working for some uniformity, and it's we're a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
Get the aspects.
But I
saw the aspects.
I know I think the last thing, I think I talked last time about scheduling as far as keeping the unified art structure the same with 6 weeks on, 5 weeks off, or won't come back for a couple more sessions, conversations. So I think I covered everything. You did. And then my handbook, there are no major updates aside from I went in and kind of updated like personnel and names, and that was really about all I had for big changes. But I do agree with, there's probably a larger, intense editing as we start moving towards restorative conversations that I'll probably have to embed into our handbook. But for now, the only major change I did was get our bus expectations aligned with what we said we were going to do as an SU. And then for important dates, September 13th is Picture Day. Levi Irish sent out a challenge, and I'm definitely going to take it, because why not? But she dared all the faculty, or challenged all the faculty, because dare is one of those negative terms, I guess, right? Challenged to see if who could come up with like the wackiest, wildest, most creative staff photo.
Oh.
Last year she was pretending to answer a phone, holding a banana, telling somebody to wait. So that was last year. So that was the threshold. I also saw that my uncle, who was a principal at Camel's Hump Middle School for many, many years, his last one, which he kept for like 15 years, so it was probably a little outdated, but he dressed up, I think, as like a biker and had like a whole hair and thing. So I might do something silly. Not too silly, though.
Will you take 2 pictures? Just wondering.
Just to have the other one?
No, because they go on all of yours. Everybody gets it home. Like, I think you should probably have 2 pictures taken of each
One
of
that
your
goes
staff
to the
members.
official place and one that goes to the
yeah,
other
I mean,
one.
they go home and
Shouldn't be on the
parents say
website.
that. It should not be on the
don't do that
class
on the website,
picture list.
Everybody's
Like,
yearbook.
parents
Yeah.
should, yeah.
So at retake time,
Right.
you should get one.
There
Yes,
you go.
that's right.
Yeah.
Let's do it
There.
Yeah.
Now make him do 2 at once. So it's done.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Or having fun.
Yeah,
That's
Because
Yeah,
you,
he's
I mean, you want your badge picture, but then you also, and your badge picture needs to be identifiable because that's a security thing.
Right.
So don't like block your face with a banana. Kind of defeats the purpose. But I love the idea and the creativity.
Yeah.
Let's make it a duplicate.
All right.
piece.
I'll remind the staff.
No, I'm
about
no
that.
fun. The kids tell me that all the time. You're no fun, Mom.
These pictures are gonna be pictures with
The kids.
the
Class
with
picture.
pictures of the principal. The rest of us, though.
And then I think I put like our soccer schedule I put into
Yep.
there as well. So come to some home games or away games or whatnot. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Good story.
Okay. Thank you. Questions or comments for Lenny?
Yeah, do you know, did they give you a timeline on when you'll know if you've been accepted into the restorative practice?
I could go back and look, but I feel like it was something like late September was when they were going to come back.
Yeah.
The application deadline I think was end of August or late August.
I just heard today from our restorative person that there's 10 slots open, 75 schools.
Right.
So there's a major need in
Yeah.
the state for it, so it'll be exciting to hear.
3 handbooks to approve.
Okay.
You have, I think
which
it's
one do-
3. You have
we have Sheldon.
Bakersfield, and Montgomery. I think they did yours last time. Yes.
Motion to approve the handbooks from Bakersfield, Montgomery, and Sheldon. Anybody want to make that motion?
Make that motion.
Leanne,
Excellent.
comments, questions? Okay.
We're gonna
You
see
wanna
them
see
first?
Oh, okay. Didn't we see one already?
I thought they were
She saw
electronically
Sheldon.
shared.
Yeah.
Mine
Some of
was
them
not.
were.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't
Only
get,
Sheldon.
yeah, I didn't.
Sheldon one
What about
came
Montgomery?
through.
I
But
didn't
mine
get
went
mine.
today.
Oh, I didn't get
You
it.
know what I mean?
Okay.
I was
I
bringing
only
the
have 3
hard
copies, but I have copies.
So
I have copies.
here's what I'm gonna ask. Like, do you have hard copies? So we're at
we-
the 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
It's
you're
long.
not gonna have time to read them. I think you
Right.
should give them to
Yep.
them and then just make sure that they send the electronic link.
Mine, mine went today.
Okay,
The
so everybody
electronic
has it
link. Would you rather
electronically.
just see them
I
electronically?
would love a hard copy.
Yeah. So if you have the hard copy, that's
Is there a way
fine.
that we
I
could
think
approve
that
them like we
in
do
terms
in
of your
budget?
review and approval,
Once we read them Sunday.
if you have
I approve.
feedback for them to approve,
Oh,
these, to be honest, have already gone out in
I
these
know.
situations. So each year we try to bring them to the board for formal approval. So it still would be good if we could approve them tonight, even though you're going to take them home and look more
Anybody
in
want one
depth.
on that side? No.
I have
No, that
seen
was
it
the
many a time in the past. Do you want to see it?
That's a set. She did get 2 and you, one
Oh,
second.
sorry.
You got
Okay,
it.
Gotcha.
Sorry, what would you like us to
I
do?
still
I'm
want you
sorry,
to
I wanted
formally
to
approve,
see.
even though they're not going to have time to read through these. And
Right,
then if they
okay.
have feedback, we can bring it back next time.
Is this an okay time to clarify? Bakersfield had a huge bus issue last year. We talked about firming up the language about the hazard. Do you remember
Turnarounds
that?
and things.
I
remember
do.
that.
I think it should be at the. Okay. Go ahead.
I think maybe you clarify when we can bring those, like if I have to go with, do you know what I mean? The
Can
one,
you
the
show me the
language.
page that will help me
I'll have
with the
to find
language?
it.
Because I'm thinking of 2 different things we said about that handbook.
Okay.
And I'm not sure I exactly have the right one.
So there was language in this about school closures and buses and what maybe it's under, it's all about being able to go to activities afterwards. And the bus is traveling on hazard roads. And I think we were looking at firming up some language around what that meant. because I think there's confusion around. It's really the roads that are hazardous are the ones that the buses, like the bus company determines the hazard. I can't remember.
Yeah, the bus company determined the hazard with the town road manager.
You're talking about after school events.
Somewhere in here.
So if a student misses a school day, they can't go to after school events. And
Right.
there was an issue that came up last year surrounding the buses didn't transport, but they still had school. Kids didn't come to school because the roads, they didn't want to put their, I can't remember, but the kids, then there was a big issue about their kids not being able to participate in the sport.
The bus did transport, but the parent chose not to send them.
Right, and there's language, and I can look at it and highlight it, but there was language in there. It was a little unclear that if you're...
Whether they could participate in the after-school activities?
No, it was surrounding the...
It was a game, eligibility for a game, right?
And I didn't, that part, it was the part that said the hazard, the road hazards, because that's where I thought the parent...
I don't remember seeing
Can you,
anything about
since this has already gone home, Erin, I think it's okay for you to find it and then bring it to
bring it
Rhoda,
to
and
me.
we can make an adjustment and revision to it.
All right, I'll do that.
Okay. So Leanne made the motion to accept the handbooks. Are we ready to vote on that? Can we vote? Okay. Everyone in favor say aye?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay.
I'm somewhat opposed, because I feel it's hard having not had access to them, to read them and approve things that I haven't had a time to review yet. And whether that would mean we'd have any agency to make changes at this late notice, I would suggest that we do this in July or the summertime.
June
If we're
or
really,
August, yeah.
if we really need to have these ready for the beginning of school, which we do, because we want to get them out to families. I mean, for a lot of us, I've been reading this for 16 years.
Right,
Like, it's
right,
this
right,
whole-
And
I
it's new for
I
you
could
this year.
probably recite it, most of it, but I just say for new
Right.
families, obviously, and we need to refresh people's memories and minds, and I think a lot of parents probably don't even read the entire thing. But that said, if we really want to dissect any part, there's not time now to make any changes for this year we're in, so it feels like going through the motions to support it when I didn't have time to actually look through it and bring up any concerns. I've had issues with the Montgomery dress code for probably over a decade. I'd love to tease it apart. Some of the language feels outdated, sexist, it's policing girls' bodies. I've had issues with this for a while. But I would have loved in June to see, are there ways that we could rework that? But that said, we need to put it out there now.
And we have
However,
talked about this before.
I'm glad we're having this conversation now, because these are intended to come to you in August. However, things get in the way. We're transitioning. It didn't happen in all those cases. But it doesn't mean that we can't make revisions as we're going. So it still want you to take it away and look at all of these documents and then come back and say, because this is a good time for them to start thinking about what revisions are we going to make as we move forward.
Okay.
The process of revising these handbooks is long.
I'm sure.
And huge. It's arduous. So I think that it's reasonable for you to be dissecting this and then coming back and saying, could we look at this again? Could we look at some of these?
Can I also
Makes me
add,
wonder if we could,
working on them together a little bit?
well, I was gonna say, just like we do with our policies.
Yeah.
I think it'd be productive if we took a chunk at a time, every time we met here, kind of thing. We'd be all aligned, we'd all know how and why we did what we did, and we'd be approving as we go. And maybe by the time we get to June, we got the whole thing almost done, or at least we've got the more troublesome parts
Just
attacked.
seeing the other ones has been helpful, because I'm like, oh, I should add that to mine.
I want to be thoughtful about like what's the work of the administrators and what's the work of the board, though. And I wonder if there's some pre-work and value to the four of you working on the
That's what I was
alignment piece,
thinking.
because that's not really the level of detail that the board should be trying to control. They really are in the place where they should be looking at and asking the questions about where did that come from, or asking the questions about, you know, could a group relook at this because I have some concerns, not necessarily dictating, here's how I want you to change this policy, but to say, could we relook at this policy because, you know, I have these questions or concerns. So I think bringing those things up now is valuable for them to be looking at, and maybe there's an opportunity for them to work throughout the year.
And I want to add that that's why I said what I said in my report as well, that my leadership team is going to be looking at this as well, because I really feel like it's more than just principals. I think that there needs to be input from the teachers and even from kids.
I started working on the dress code. with
Community
kids,
too.
Yeah.
And it was a huge
Parent organizations.
process.
Yep.
Do we
Hard to capture.
do we think that we'll ever get to a point? And I've really only ever read the Bakersfield one, but like that there would be like an NMV school handbook.
I don't know why not.
I mean, you'd think that some of these things are generic, and even I mean, you'd think there's enough of it that's generic enough or universal across these buildings enough that maybe there could still be one that says Sheldon and Berkshire and Bakersfield, but that, you know, 90% of it is universal, and there's 10% that's about the evacuation routes or whatever those, you know, unique things are.
I think you're dead on. I think you can have an NMV handbook, but then it
With the
says
appendix
Berkshire,
of-
and like you said, you know, 50 of the 60 pages are standardized.
Yeah.
And it's personalized for the 10. Sorry, that's overwhelming. 30 pages.
Okay, I was like, that's
It's late.
there you
Big
go.
numbers are coming out of my mouth.
I don't know, that one's pretty long. Bakersfield's is
I feel like for the kids, I'm thinking
Right.
how can our kids move from one
Yeah.
hand to the next?
Yeah.
Why would it be totally
Well,
just
we want
one?
equity.
I'm sure they're all very similar. It'd be nice to review all four and consolidate
Right.
them.
And then it's not as arduous a process if there's mostly one document,
I
right?
volunteer Sandy to do it.
I'm so glad you have faith in me.
If
I
there are
delegate.
sections that the principals are working on and feel that they need or want or have been asked for us to give input, then maybe that could come to our board meetings, like if there is a specific concern around, say, a dress code.
Go for it.
policy.
I would
Yeah.
love to see the board.
Then
right
bring it here, but otherwise, all of you can just continue on in the background, tweaking and revising. Because I voted to approve the handbooks because I trust the principals that they're not putting anything egregious in this. That it is what it is right now until somebody wants to make changes.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the motion passed, if I'm correct. Caroline? Yeah, we all were in ayes, yeah, okay. One kind of, sort of, no, yeah. Okay, board business.
So, I am prepared to do some professional learning with the board tonight around roles and responsibilities and differentiation between board and superintendent, and then eventually getting to the principal level. However, what has become clear to me now in our second month of merged meetings with multiple principals and multiple schools at the table is that these meetings are long, and I have feedback from the other side of our organization that there's a request for me to consider picking another night in the month that is about board development. Rather than weaving it in now. I still can weave it in now, and I can manage the other side the other way, but it's up to you. The feedback I got was right now we're almost 2.5 hours in, and you still have Lenny's spotlight, which I've asked him to be 10, 15.
Supposedly I run long, but I will make I'll be efficient.
10 or 15 minutes for his spotlight. So I'm looking for feedback from you. So I have a 5-minute video and I have a document to review.
Okay, so just for tonight or for future?
Well, what I have
This
is
is
just
the
for
first step.
tonight. This is just the first step in the training piece, but I can't really do a lot in this amount of time because by the time you are available to do this, we're going to be pushing on hour 3 at these meetings.
I do have a question. When you talk about this piece, do you mean just for the board members and not for the administrators and our friend Morgan? Or do they all have to be present for that as well?
I don't think they all have to be present.
Right.
I don't think it hurts for people to be present.
Right.
Especially if
let
we
me
have
be
it on
the first
another
to
night.
say that I get up at 5 o'clock this
Yeah.
morning, and I am beginning to run on empty because it's late. So, and I don't think I'm alone in that statement. So, I would prefer giving up any other time. You know,
Okay.
another evening, another afternoon. I'm fairly flexible. So,
So I have another UUSD meeting next week, and I know the same conversation's going to come up. So what I may do is have Courtney do a doodle, another meeting doodle, and see if we can find. I think this summer was impossible
too much, yeah.
to find any time, but like I said, I don't mind doing it this way. I just don't know how available you're going to be as board members to receive it. And if we can do it on another night, I'd be more likely to be able to get Susan to come in.
Yeah.
And help me with it, which I think will be more valuable.
And Lynn, do you see that as something that would be on the monthly? So a
I
separate
think
standalone meeting
not
for
regularly.
just board
I
members?
think a month or 2 or 3, depending on the scope of
Yeah.
how far you want to go with the professional learning. And then I think that we can weave the work into our meetings. But I think the learning, the board development, we could do in a 2 or 3 month period. Just
Yeah.
one extra meeting for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, and could we, and if would it be SU wide potentially?
I think it's a much more
Kind of
efficient way
more
for us to
efficient,
do it and look
yes.
at it, because what I'm also very aware of is we've worked incredibly hard for alignment in our supervisory union, and what I would not want to see is NMV to really function like an entirely separate entity and ERUUSD start to function as an entirely separate entity, because there's power in us doing a lot of the visioning and the directional work together. So when we think about goal setting, I think that there's value that both boards can bring to the table and in some of that dialogue. So I think it would be, I think you can still structure opportunities for both boards to have separate work time, so it wouldn't be in all of it together.
I also think that, so we could do this without the everybody else present, and I love Julia, but her maybe would be important for the next person in that position to be part of that as well.
Right.
That big spoiler alert. Can we just skip ahead for 2 seconds to talk about Julia's news she wants to share with the board?
We found a house, and so this will be my last meeting. But I've loved working with everybody, and I wish you guys all the best of luck. And I think there are some candidates or candidates.
You've got some good. I will share with the team that Julia told me this last month, and I yelled and screamed and cried and carried on for a few moments, but and so we really appreciate the time and effort that you have put forth in being on this board. I think it was a much bigger piece of work for both of you ladies than it was for the rest of us that all really pretty much knew each other. So I'm really thankful that you were able to give that time. And it sounds like since we last spoke that maybe you do have some folks that might be interested in coming into your seat. So that's also good news, because I think it's really important that you do have another member there. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the new board you're going to be on then?
The house renovation board.
So I just want to tag a little bit to what Jean Marie said. You've had a heavy lift in this process, and I just want to say publicly that I feel like you have served your community in Sheldon so admirably, Julia. Like going through this really challenging process and really advocating for the needs of Sheldon, the students and the teachers, it's been incredible to watch, because I've been able to see pieces of it all the way through this process, and it's been an honor for me to work with you at this level, and I just want to thank you for everything you've done for the community of Sheldon. You've done a wonderful job.
And I'm 2 minutes down the road, so if there's anything you guys need, I'd be happy to jump back in.
I know where she is.
it's a small community. Okay, so I think we made a decision about board development. Does that feel like we've all decided to not tonight? Okay.
I'd like a little input into that, and I don't know how much some people are already on the FNESU board, so I don't know if that time frame, day of week might work for people since they already have that open. and I don't know how long those meetings are gonna go, but my weeks now look like what yours used to, when you had many multiple board meetings to attend. So the likelihood of me making another night that I'm not already scheduled for is gonna be pretty impossible. But I am scheduled to come to like one of your FNESU meetings.
I've thought about that too. My worry is again at that how much time, because we're doing so much work organizationally. I don't know how far into the meeting we're gonna get before people are available, and I see it in faces when we're, at 9 o'clock in a meeting, and this is information I really want it to stick because I think that it's important for us to recognize and be able to proactively understand this so that we can have our best foot going forward. So maybe could you and I talk about if there are any available nights before I do the.
Put out your survey.
We could do the doodle poll.
Yep.
Okay.
And we'll just see what happens. I had multiple days this summer that I could do it, but apparently.
I literally
the
most I think common was 5.
For me.
I had one night where 5 people of the. How many do we have? 14 could come. 5 or 6. Okay.
Is that inclusive of board goal setting?
Yeah, it's all
okay
together.
Sheldon bond.
I think Morgan's already done that.
Okay. Board vacancy. Sadly, we've covered.
How does that get decided?
Yes, good question.
Fill the seat?
We think it's select board.
No, you.
board.
Will,
Oh, we get to nominate somebody.
Yeah, we do.
Well, you get to appoint until the next election. So you
it
have
was just
more
in the
than one
transition
person.
that it was this.
You have one person.
Oh.
Do you want to talk through?
Oh, good.
Sure. So, her name is, she was Chelsea Kane. She's now Chelsea Men's School. Born and raised Sheldon, strong family ties to Sheldon. She has 2 small children. Her son will be entering Sheldon School the next year, I believe. Strong business financial background, very bright girl. And she wanted to, I think she's wanted to be on for a little bit, but with all the stuff around Act 46, it was just too much.
A little overwhelming
too
for
much,
all of us.
but no, I told her we're scheduled one meeting a month.
One meeting a month. That's how we all got suckered in. Yeah.
You're joined. So she's very excited. She's a go-getter. I think you guys really enjoy her being on this board.
How do you spell? Is it MENDSCOLE? Okay.
I worked with Chelsea briefly at People's Trust many years ago.
Yep.
So
yeah, she's a sweet girl.
And I know Chelsea also.
Yep. So she'll be a good addition for sure.
She's comfortable with us making a motion to appoint her this evening?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Emily has appointed, one more time, Chelsea Men's School. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, gotcha.
Hyphenated.
Gotcha. Okay. To Julia's vacated seat. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Well, we will be excited to meet Chelsea on October 2nd in Montgomery. Cool.
6:30. Could you forward some contact information for Chelsea to, I'm going to say, Morgan?
Okay.
That would be helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. But Lenny left.
So we're going to pause the meeting here and we're going to do a little tour of the building. I think that, we said we're going to do a spotlight each month in each school. Some of you have never walked around some of these buildings, so I think his idea was to bring you around and do. Oh, Mary,
you can just sit here.
Abstain. Respectfully abstain.
Yeah. So he also wants to talk about some programming, like he's going to talk about some social emotional learning supports as he's going around.
Put a hyphen in.
We could wheel you if you wanted. We have the ability to do that, and there's an elevator.
Oh, okay. I mean, I can try. I'm tired too. Like by 9, I've been crutching around all day around my house, trying to make meals and do laundry on the crutches.
It's up to you.
I'm a little beat too. I'll keep up for as long as I feel.
You're gonna be quick, and you're gonna talk us through some of the programming space, whatever.
Should we adjourn now though and have this as an after the meeting?
Yeah, I think
is
that's
that okay? Yeah.
I don't think he's gonna follow us around.
If you have any like program highlights you wanted, could you just give us right now and then, I mean, I've been around this school before and my son attended, so I was thinking we can.
2 days ago.
You can do it. Choose your own adventure. I'm here for you guys. So whatever works for
You're
you.
gonna differentiate.
Yeah.
Okay, let us adjourn.
Okay.
How about we adjourn first? Anyone want to make the motion that we adjourn? How about you, Mary, since you're so hot to go?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
At 9 o'clock on the button. Thank you all. Thank you.
I'm putting all